What do you know about the 1% of people? The so-called villains, the elite, the ones who really rule the world, those who makes us suffer and stay poor. They control politics, information, and wealth. They are said to be doing everything possible to hide the cure for cancer, lying about AI, and misleading us about global warming. Or are they? Have you ever wondered where all of this is coming from? If you think this is just a conspiracy theory, let me tell you, it has a very solid foundation. For most of history, only a small group of people had access to knowledge. These were kings, priests, and the elite. Well, about 1% of global population. The rest, the 99%, were peasants, farmers, and workers who lived their lives in ignorance, working hard to survive. The truth is, the 1% didn't hold into power through force alone. They convinced the 99% that they didn't need knowledge. They made people believe that obedience and hard work were all that mattered. And in return, people accepted their roles, believing it was natural order of things. But was it? Let's go to the very beginning. It's year 1 on the calendar. The Roman Empire was at its strongest, but it was a world of sharp differences. A Roman senator, dressed in fine robes, spent his day debating laws or reading scrolls in Latin or Greek. Meanwhile, a peasant farmer, barefoot and dressed in a tunic, was out plowing fields from sunrise to sunset. For the elite, education was essential. They needed it to govern, lead armies, and maintain control. They studied philosophy, history, and law. They discussed ideas in public forums, and their wealth gave them the luxury of learning. But for the peasant, life was about survival. Most couldn't read or write and didn't see a reason to learn. Their days were filled with planting, harvesting, and tending animals. Knowledge for them was practical: how to farm, mend tools, and care for families. The Roman elite believed that education wasn't meant for everyone. They thought it would disrupt society. Educated people asked questions, and questions challenged authority. That system worked because the majority accepted their roles, believing the gods had placed everyone where they belong: rulers to rule, workers to work. By the year 500, the Roman Empire in the West had collapsed, and Europe entered the Middle Ages. This was a time when the Catholic Church became the most powerful institution in Europe. The Church didn't just control religion, it controlled knowledge. Monasteries became the centers of learning, but only for monks and priests. Books were handwritten, expensive, and written in Latin, a language only the clergy and nobles could understand. The Church taught people they didn't need education to live a good life. Faith was enough. The promise of heaven kept them happy, even when their lives were hard. A peasant life in the Middle Ages were grueling. They woke up before sunrise to tend crops or livestock. Meals were simple: bread, porridge, and perhaps some vegetables. They worked until sunset and prayed before bed. Their world was small, limited to their village and the teachings of their priests. For the elite, life was very different. A nobleman might spend his day hunting, managing his estates, or attending feasts. If he was literate, he could read books, discuss politics, or write letters. Education gave him the tools to maintain his power and wealth. But why didn't the peasants demand more? Well, the Church thought that rebellion was a sin. Lords enforced their power through taxes and violence, and the peasants accepted it because they didn't know any other way of life. Options? There are no such things as options. By the 1400s, Europe began to change. The Renaissance brought new ideas about art, science, and human potential. The invention of the printing press in the 15th century made books cheaper and more accessible. For the first time, knowledge began to spread beyond the elite. But even then, the 1% worked to maintain control. The Catholic Church banned books that challenged its authority. Nobles feared that educated peasants might rise up against them. After all, Knowledge leads to questions, and questions lead to revolutions. Take Martin Luther as an example. In 1517, he challenged the church by translating the Bible into German so ordinary people could read it. His action sparked the Reformation, a movement that questioned not just the church but the entire structure of society. Educated men and women supported this change, demanding reforms and new rights. For most peasants, however, life remained the same. A farmer in the 1500s still spent his day in the fields. His wife worked just as hard, tending the home and raising children. They still couldn't read and relied on their church and their Lord for guidance. But cracks in the system were beginning to show. Some peasants joined revolts inspired by new ideas of equality and freedom. They realized that knowledge could be a weapon against oppression. Throughout history, the elites, kings, priests, and nobles feared knowledge because it was a threat to their power. Education gave people the tools to question authority, demand rights, and organize revolutions. The elites were a necessary evil. Many believed they were protecting society by keeping knowledge restricted. They thought that if everyone had access to information, chaos would follow. An educated peasant might ask question why they have to pay taxes. A merchant might ask why the church controls salvation. And a female might demand a government chosen by the people, not by birth. But was this fear justified? The revolutions that eventually came, from the French Revolution to the Industrial Revolution, did break down the old systems. Knowledge created change, but it also brought new challenges, like inequality in modern education and access to technology. Now, we live in a different world, where knowledge is more accessible than ever. The internet allows us to learn anything at any time. But does this mean the divide has disappeared? The idea of the 1% controlling people's lives and dictating their future feels outdated today. The 1% now isn't the same, and the claim that they control the masses seems a bit exaggerated. Unless, of course, you live in a dictatorship like North Korea or, more recently, Russia. If you did, you wouldn't even be able to watch this video. Just to give you some perspective, in 1600s, only 7% of the global population could read, compared to 86% in 2025. Do you think the 1% still holds all the strings? And this raises another question. Was life easier when people knew their roles and didn't question them? Or is it better now when we have so many options that we often don't know what to do? Is freedom of choice worth the confusion it brings? The story of the 1% and the 99% isn't about villains and victims. It's about how societies maintain order. The elites feared knowledge because it threatened stability. The peasants accepted their roles because they believed it was the natural way of things. Today we have the freedom to learn, question, and choose our paths. But with this freedom comes responsibility. Share your thoughts in the comments. How do you think the world is divided now? Is it still the same 1% above the 99? Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Natasha and see you tomorrow.